Today, I'm going to be doing an in-depth comparison between British Airways and Qatar Airways aboard their newest business class products. We're going to be looking at the seats, the food, the lounges, the entertainment, and so much more. So without further ado, let's get into it. With these styles of reviews, I so often like to start with the check-in. It's of course your first touch point with an airline, and it's such an important step. British Airways, as part of their home at Terminal 5, have recently moved where they have their business class check-in. It's all the way down towards the left-hand side as you look at the terminal, really large business class wing. And here you have a bit of a choice. You either go for a very automated, technology-led approach and do yourselves, print out your own boarding pass and pop your own bag on. Alternatively, you can go up to the man desk if you like more of a human touch. I've never had any issues checking in with British Airways at Terminal 5. I've always found the experience to be silky smooth. Yes, there's not a private area of the terminal just dedicated to business class, but I think this new wing works wonderfully well, and conveniently it's right next to the private security that you then flow onto. With Qatar Airways, we're actually going to start with one of their outstations. Here was Oslo in Norway. I've always found their business class check-ins around the world to be really nice and smooth. As for their home at Hamad International Airport in Qatar, I've got a little bit of vertical footage for you here. They have a premium check-in area. It's a completely private area of the terminal, and my goodness, does it work well. Next up, let's broach the all-important topic of the pre-flight experience, courtesy of the lounges. Now, with British Airways, they have an extensive lounge network around the world, as do Qatar Airways, but focusing here with both airlines' home facilities, you could say. With British Airways at Heathrow's Terminal 5, they do have a couple of different lounges you can use. They call it Galleries Business Class Lounge, whether it's the north and south side of the terminal. Both of them have quite similar facilities. British Airways have kind of rejuvenated their lounges of late. Overall, however, they have been incredibly busy in the last year to 24 months or so. On the food front, it's all buffet. It kind of works okay. It's a little bit samey, perhaps you could say. Throughout the rest of the lounges themselves, they then have a number of drink selections, be it softer drinks, teas, coffees, etc., or indeed alcoholic areas where you can just walk up, inspect the selection, and indeed then go on to help yourself. Overall, I think British Airways really missed a trick not massively rejuvenating these lounges during the COVID period. Yes, they've got some new carpets, they've got some new furniture, but really, Heathrow needs to be their flagship global lounge, and they just don't scream flagship. They do have other lounges around the world, be it the Greenwich lounges and others in New York's JFK, for example, that are miles ahead. I think the area where they really let themselves down, and perhaps the age of the lounge shows to the greatest extent, is within both the toilet and the shower facilities. With the corridors to one side, I think the showers in particular look so prefabbed, and I can't believe that these would have looked particularly good even when they were new. It's a shame because they've got some nice toiletries as part of them. They're nice and private. They've got the toilets within them as well, which I really like, and they're plenty spacious enough, but the design of them is not good and they really need to be updated, but they do at least have them, and that is important. Next up, let's jump on over to Qatar Airways and see how they fare. Frankly, the headline here is absolutely phenomenally well. In my opinion, they have the best business class lounges anywhere in the world. Very few airlines even come close. They have a couple of main business class lounges in Doha. These are known as the Al Marjan Lounge, and indeed the Al Marjan Garden Lounge is the brand new one, featured here with the wonderful views out over the new garden area. On the food and drinks front, they've got you very well covered. Indeed, just look at the presentation of everything here. There's indeed a buffet area, as we saw. There's also then an area where you can sit down and order a la carte. That's always something that I very much enjoy doing. They've got the menus on the little scanners available for you there. Mixture of different tables, whether it's high top or low top, and I'll give you a couple of seconds or so to enjoy this menu and get fully stuck into it. I should say, whilst we peruse the menus together, one thing that you notice with a Qatar Airways business lounge is the quality of drinks on offer. Now, BA have some decent wines as part of their business class lounges. The Qatar ones are so far beyond even what BA I think would have as part of their first class lounges. absolutely wonderful selection of wines and also champagnes. That's definitely something that's well worth getting into if that's your thing. Also, really good selection of spirits, be it whiskies, vodka, liqueurs, others, etc. Top marks on that front. When you opt for any sort of luxury product or experience, for me, it's the little things that make the biggest difference. Sitting down to dinner and having a nice cocktail presented to you, it just makes such a difference, I think. The food, as you could see, looked absolutely fantastic. I had both a main course and then also a dessert to finish. Lovely glass of the Sauvignon Blanc to tie it all together. Really is the most wonderful lounge experience, and unfortunately, as a proud bit, I would have to say that Qatar goes so far ahead of British Airways on this front. In terms of seating areas, there's a variety for you as part of their lounges. A number of the seats are also power enabled, which does make a very big difference, of course, in this day and age with us being so charge dependent. Now, as we start to wrap up our insight into the lounges, one thing you may be forgiven for wondering is where on earth is everyone as part of the Qatar lounge? And one of the aspects I absolutely love about the Qatar lounges is that for a number of hours throughout any given day, typically they're beautifully quiet. Yes, they do have their busy periods, often between around 12 midnight through until around 3 o'clock in the morning, where lots of flights are changing, but actually they are generally really nice and quiet. Contrast that for a moment to the British Airways lounges, who are massively oversubscribed at the moment. From the moment that they open almost until they close, they can be incredibly busy at London's Heathrow, and I think when you're enjoying that premium experience, you do want a nice quiet lounge, and Qatar definitely delivers that much better than BA at the moment. Alrighty, and just before we head down to the plane to check out the onboard experience, a quick view into the facilities. Of course, these are the showers. It's chalk and cheese from the British Airways experience. Same sort of space on offer, but it's those fixings that make the biggest difference. So without further ado, let's jump on board and see the most important aspect of any review. Of course, it's going to be the cabin, the seats. What's the environment going to be like when you're on board? Well, first things first. Kicking off with British Airways, we land with the Club Suites. This is their most up-to-date business class design. Seats now laid out in a 1-to-1 configuration, with each seat getting its own privacy door. It's a huge move on from the old style yin-yang of business class, and that's the product that we're going to be focusing in on as part of our comparison. Now, whilst we take a little bit more of an in-depth look into the seats, I'm not going to commentate too much on the features. You can see those for yourselves. No doubt one of the most frequent comments that will be down in the comment section will be on how many aircraft are these seats currently rolled out. Now, at the time of recording, it's a big majority, thankfully, of the Heathrow fleet. They're on all of the new aircraft, so that's the A350s. And also the 787-10s. Now, British Airways have rolled this out pretty much to all of the 777s just now, so that just leaves the A380s to go, and then the older Dreamliners, so that's the 787-8s and also 787-9s. Now, when you come to booking your flight, it'll be really obvious as to which seat you've got, and that'll just be depicted by the seat map. If it's that nice reverse herringbone 1-to-1 format, you know you've got the newer seats. As mentioned, however, I think this is a really big move onwards for British Airways. Many of the wrongs with the previous seat design they've righted. With this one, plenty of storage, lots of charging options within Easy Reach, and you've got all of the controls for the seat again within Easy Reach as well. I would say they've done a really good job with this seat design. For me, being slightly critical, I think some of the materials feel a little bit cheaper, and I don't think they'll wear too well, but we'll see with the test of time. For now, let's jump on board with Qatar Airways, aboard one of their newer Dreamliners, and see their new mini suite. Now, in terms of this seats format, they've gone for something pretty akin to British Airways, so seats laid out in a 1-to-1 configuration, and what that means is that every single passenger is guaranteed aisle access. Like British Airways as well, each of the seats, or indeed suites as they call them, have a sliding door. With Qatar, this is ever so slightly bigger, so it elevates even more that feeling of privacy, particularly when it comes to sleeping. In terms of direct comparison to British Airways, for me, I'm a little bit more of a fan of this seat's design. I was in 1K on that occasion. There's just something about the lighting, about the design, about the touch points, just a little bit more of a feeling of quality. And that's something that always comes across with Qatar Airways, where a ledge may well be plastic with British Airways. With Qatar, it's a bit more of a leather effect, etc, etc, etc. You get the idea. In terms of a lot of the seat's main features, actually, It rivals with British Airways fairly evenly in terms of storage, in terms of charging. It's everything that you could expect from a modern business class seat design. But as I say, for me, it's those little touches, it's the lamps, it's that feeling of quality that sets Qatar that little bit above even on the seating front. Now, whilst we're contrasting Qatar's newest design as part of this comparison, this isn't even Qatar's flagship product. This is known as the Q Suite. It appears largely across the 777 fleet within Qatar's makeup. And actually, it's even bigger than this one because it's on a larger aircraft. It's still 121 across, but it's ever so slightly more wide, hence why they couldn't get it on the slightly smaller Dreamliner. And it just shows, I think, for me, the depth of their design and quality and how it runs through the suite. Now, when it comes to the Q Suite, we are expecting the brand new one to start being rolled out in the next few years, and that is going to look absolutely phenomenal. For now, this is their absolute newest design, and for me, they are a little bit ahead of British Airways. That all being said, I think both airlines are very strong when it comes to the seating, so we are slightly splitting hairs in terms of the comparison just on this particular front. But hey ho, this is a comparison review, and that is of course why we're here. Now, as a final aspect that I'll mention will be around the sleeping arrangements. Now, a little bit later into the review, we will have a separate section on the beds and the levels of comfort there, etc, etc. But as a final aspect that I'll mention, with that huge sliding door, it is that little bit bigger than British Airways, and it does help to facilitate an incredibly private cabin. With all of that being said, and indeed, without further ado, let's take a quick look at the pre-departure service, and then we'll get up into the skies and see what the experience is like with both airlines just there. So, pre-departure with British Airways. Now, as a slight defensive aspect for them, that glass of champagne had a few sips of before I got into it. With BA, they do the hot towel in the air, they do have the bubbly as you jump on board. For me, however, Qatar once again blows them out of the water on this front. It's just the look and feel of things, I think, that makes the biggest difference. And on that front, they win. Now, on the bathrooms front, British Airways do have dedicated bathrooms, thankfully, for the business class cabin. They sometimes have a couple of little lotions and potions for them. I quite like this slightly larger bathroom design. I think this is a step up from what you'd expect from a very small economy bathroom. So they do okay. But once again, I think for me, Qatar are ever so slightly ahead. In terms of the general amenities they always have out on display in their bathrooms, that is a slight cut above. Aboard the Dreamliners, you even have features such as a window. How cool is that? Something, of course, to keep your eye on when you're on the ground. But those unique little features, I think, is what sets a good airline apart from an absolutely great airline. And for that reason, I think on the bathrooms front, Qatar are ever so slightly ahead. Now, of course, we're contrasting two long-haul cabins, and for those long, boring flights, entertainment is absolutely key. On this front, I think both airlines do nicely. With the British Airways new seat design, you get a wonderfully large TV, all within easy reach. You can control it using the touchscreen. It's responsive there for you. You've also got a controller down to your side if you prefer to sit back and recline. Now, when it comes to British Airways High Life, I never have any issues whatsoever in finding something really decent to keep me very entertained during the flight. In addition to the TV screen itself, you've got a nice high quality headset that accompanies it. I think that's an important aspect on the business front. And then, of course, beyond that, there's also onboard Wi-Fi. Now, when it comes to those onboard Wi-Fi packages, British Airways in recent times have become a little bit more generous. They've started offering messaging completely free of charge throughout the duration of the flight, so that's a nice step forward for them. Now, when it comes to the rest of the packages, whilst free Wi-Fi is offered in first class, sadly, that benefit isn't afforded to the business class passengers. Here, you've got a range of different packages that you can opt for. These generally filter down nowadays from browse and stream. This ranges from a very small amount for a limited time period, or indeed you've then got the full flight pass, which does range a little bit in terms of how much it costs depending on the length of the flight. Usually this is between about £15 to £20, so it's not too bad. Now, on the Qatar side, I think this is an area that they do really very well in. Firstly, they have external cameras. This is an aspect that British Airways don't have, and for a nav geek like me, I think it makes a really big difference. In terms of the core of their entertainment system, they have a ton of different options. Just like BA, I'm never short of things to watch, so on this front, they do particularly well. Just like British Airways, they offer onboard Wi-Fi across their fleet, perhaps slightly more generous on this front. They do offer 1 hour completely free of charge for privileged club members. It's just their rewards club, similar to British Airways Executive Club. You can sign up on board. Beyond that, there's then a range of different packages that you can choose from. From a Qatar point of view, I think they're ever so slightly more cost competitive, a little bit more generous on this front. Pair that with those external cameras, and I think they're ahead on the entertainment front. So, we've taken to the skies, we've had a moment to check out their entertainment offerings. Next up, let's check out the all-important catering. Now, when it comes to the pre-drinks and pre-snacks, I think this is an area that British Airways do increasingly well in this day and age. I love the glasses that they use for the gin and tonics. It is so important for us Brits. Apologies to my overseas viewers, but that for me is absolutely key. I think they could do a little bit better in terms of the presentation of the snacks, the nuts, the pretzels, etc. that come out before, but overall, I think they do well. In terms of the food, it's okay. In terms of the presentation, I think this is an area where they could improve. Generally with BA in the business class, I always seem to have very tasty meals, but I just feel as though something's lacking. Could just be the lack of wine glasses, could be the presentation. It's good, but it isn't phenomenal. And finally, where British Airways can always be relied upon is the measures. Believe it or not, yes, this was a glass of red wine. They're very generous always on this front. Now, another area BA are pretty decent on is the desserts. Whilst this one, again, isn't presented absolutely phenomenally, the taste is always really very good, and it's a nice way to end any meal. Beyond the main service, one area I think British Airways has always been world class is on snacking between meals. They have this new club kitchen concept where you can just walk up and help yourself at any time. They're such feeders, the British Airways crew. They're great at getting you to eat your body weight in terms of food, but what a phenomenal selection, I think. Particularly in terms of snacking, for me, they'd beat any airline in terms of just being able to head up and help yourself. So from a catering point of view, I think it's a very strong start from British Airways. And when it comes to catering aboard Qatar Airways, for me, they lead the world. So in terms of a comparison front, whilst British Airways are increasingly strong, I think Qatar are a few steps ahead. There's a couple of reasons for me why they do it. Number one, we'll see a little bit later. It's around the presentation and the food quality itself. But the second aspect is around the format and the actual menu. So as a wine fan, I love how they present the wines, but more impressively than anything else, Qatar Airways have dine on demand in the business class. This is only an aspect that's typically afforded to first class passengers with other airlines. So if you jump on board in the middle of the night and you fancy breakfast, hey, you can go for breakfast and then you can then have your dinner before landing. It completely is on demand, and it truly is a wonderful service to be able to have the food you want when you want it on board. Be a little bit more into my wines, I can tell you from experience when it comes to Qatar that it's just a far more expensive offering from them. Comparing their flagship wines, as we'll do a little bit later, their French red there is typically twice the price of something from British Airways, and I think when it comes to their Sky Cellar, they're absolutely fantastic, and frankly they have been for a number of years. In terms of the pre-drinks, and go for a range of different drinks with them. This was one of their slightly more left field options here, and just again, little aspects, you can see how they present the nuts. They're a step ahead of the rest of the airlines typically that you see. The dining experience starts with them with a little amuse-bouche. You can see how wonderfully set up the table is. I love those little candle features. I'm yet to come across another airline that does it. Again, it's little things, but it makes a difference. Let's give that white wine a go and see how that goes. Yeah, a damn good start on that front. In terms of the starter itself, I so often like to start with the seafood on board because that gives me a good excuse to try the white wine. And you can see there, versus the salad from British Airways, it's a big cut above. Now I'm going to keep the footage rolling from this previous review just so you can see the full details. On the side there is the bread plate. I was missing the bread purely because I was trying to do as many courses as possible. When it comes to the main meal, again, you can see here that the presentation and indeed actually quantity is far beyond that of British Airways. I accompanied it with the red wine that flowed on beautifully into the cheese course, again with the accompaniments, with the overall presentation. They really are absolutely world class. Now that French red there was one of the best red wines I've ever had back in a business class. That was then accompanied with a dessert wine, which was again similarly not just one of the best dessert wines I've had on board a flight, but one of the best dessert wines full stop. And really, that dessert for me sums up the Qatar service on this front. It really is absolutely fantastic. In terms of snacking, they do have a couple of little options. They've got a space more towards the back of the business class cabin on the Dreamliner. We've got a few different snacks you can help yourself to. This isn't a huge aspect for Qatar because they of course do that on-demand dining, so you can always order what you'd like. So next, let's talk creature comforts. Of course, that is one of the many aspects that you're paying for as part of your very expensive business class ticket. Now, when it comes to the amenity kit, I'm a big fan of what British Airways do. Everything is provided by the White Company. It looks absolutely superb, and I like those leather pouches. On the Qatar Airways front, typically here, they do tend to do that a little bit better. They partner with some absolutely phenomenal brands, some of them very expensive indeed, and I'm a big fan of all of the various different lotions and potions that they have. For me, both airlines probably about similar here, with Qatar ever so slightly ahead, but both do very well indeed. One area, however, that Qatar lead is on the pyjamas front. British Airways don't provide pyjamas in the business class. What they do provide, however, is a fantastically comfortable bed. All of the bedding, again, done via the White Company. I'm a big fan of the big, fluffy, very generous pillow. In terms of that sliding door, my gut feel is that it isn't quite as high as the Qatar one, which is why I called it out as being a little bit smaller earlier into the review. To be honest, though, I'm splitting hairs. Both airlines provide an incredibly private and very comfortable sleeping experience. On the Qatar front, a little bit of a different approach in terms of the bedding. I've long been a fan of those blankets. I'd absolutely love one, to be honest with you, for my sofa back at home. Overall, they do well on this front. Wonderfully private, good amount of space as well. Perhaps an area where Qatar do things a little bit differently is a little freshen up towel to go to bed with. Again, it's those little touches that make a really big difference. And finally, one aspect that you can take away with you from the Qatar bedding experience is those smaller white pillows. I have the London one on this flight. I've got a little collection of them at home. I think it's great to be able to take something away with you. Also, one aspect that you so often get to go to bed with is some chocolates. Again, little things making the biggest difference. With that all being said, we're now reaching the conclusion of the video. Well done if you made it this far. It really has been an absolute epic. Now, of course, I could sit here and pontificate for hours on which airline I think is best, but most importantly, I want to hear from you guys, and you can let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I think it'll be an interesting one. A lot of people like British Airways just with some of those more familiar touches. For me personally, Qatar have long been my favourite airline, so it's not going to be a shock to any of you for me to reveal that Qatar would indeed be my choice in the business class. Like any comparison though, it does come down to cost. Qatar have been pretty expensive, it must be said, since COVID, so value for money as ever is super important. Otherwise, at this point in time, all that's left for me to say is to thank you all so much for watching today's video. I've got so much more similar content upcoming, so do make sure that you're subscribed so YouTube will help you keep fully up to date with the channel. And I'll very much look forward to welcoming you to another video real soon.